Hello, welcome to Biology, the Science Study of Life. Ectotherms and endotherms. There are important differences in how various species manage their heat budgets. One way to classify the thermal characteristics of animals is to emphasize the role of metabolic heat in determining body temperature. Ectotherms gain most of their heat from the environment. An ectotherm has such a low metabolic rate that the amount of heat it generates is too small to have much effect on body temperature. In contrast, endotherms can use metabolic heat to regulate their body temperature in a cold environment. An endotherm's high metabolic rate generates enough heat to keep its body substantially warmer than its surroundings. Many endotherms, including humans, maintain high and very stable internal temperatures even as the temperature of their surroundings fluctuates. Many ectotherms can thermoregulate by behavioral means such as basking in the sun or seeking out shade. But in general, ectotherms tolerate greater variation in internal temperature than do endotherms. Most invertebrate species, amphibians, lizards, snakes, and turtles are ectotherms. Mammals, birds, and few other reptiles, some fishes, and numerous insect species are endotherms. It is important to note that animals are not classified as ectotherms or endotherms based on whether they have variable or constant body temperatures. A common misconception, as mentioned earlier, it is the source of heat used to maintain body temperature that distinguishes ectotherms from endotherms. A different set of terms is used to imply variable or constant body temperatures. The term kilotherm refers to animals whose internal temperatures vary widely, and term hemiotherm refers to animals that maintain relatively stable internal temperatures. However, as scientists have gained more knowledge of animal thermoregulatory mechanisms, these terms have largely fallen out of use. Many marine fishes and invertebrates classified as poikilotherms inhabit water um, with such stable temperatures that their body temperature varies less than that of humans and other mammals. Furthermore, some mammals that were classified as homeotherms experience great variation in internal temperature. For example, a chipmunk sustains a high body temperature while it is active, but its temperature drops as hibernation. Hibernation begins because of such exceptions. The terms ectotherms and endotherms are generally more useful. Another common misconception is the idea that ectotherms are cold-blooded and endotherms are warm-blooded. Ectotherms do not necessarily have low body temperatures. In fact, when sitting in the sun, many ectotherms, lizards, have higher body temperatures than mammals. Thus, most biologists avoid the familiar terms cold-blooded and warm-blooded because they are so often misleading. It's also important to note that ectothermy and endothermy are not mutually exclusive thermoregulatory strategies. For example, a bird is an endotherm, but it may warm itself in the sun on a cold morning, much as an ectothermic lizard does. Ectothermy has several important advantages, being able to generate a large amount of heat metabolically, along with other biochemical and physiological adaptations associated with endothermy, such as elaborate circulatory and respiratory systems, enables endotherms to perform vigorous activity for much longer than it is possible for most ectotherms. Sustained intense activity such as long distance running or powered flapping flight is usually feasible only for animals with the an endothermic way of life. Endothermy also solves certain thermal problems of living on land, enabling terrestrial animals to maintain stable body temperatures in the face of environmental temperature fluctuations that are generally more severe than in aquatic habitats. For example, few ectotherms are active in the below freezing weather that prevails during winter over much of Earth's surface, but many endotherms function very well in these conditions. Most of the time, endothermic vertebrates, birds, and mammals are warmer than their surroundings, but these animals also have mechanisms for cooling the body in a hot environment, which enables them to withstand heat loads that are intolerable for most ectotherms. Endotherms are better buffered against external temperature fluctuations compared to ectotherms, but keep in mind that ectotherms are usually tolerate larger fluctuations in their internal temperatures. Being endothermic is liberating, but it is also genetically or energetically expensive. For example, at 20 Celsius degree, a human at rest has a metabolic rate of 1,300 to 1,800 kilocalorie per day (PMR). In contrast, a resting ectotherm of similar weight, such as an American alligator, has a metabolic rate of only about 60 kilocalorie per day at 20 Celsius degree SMR. Those endotherms generally need to consume much more food than ectotherms of equivalent size, a serious disadvantage for endotherms if food supplies are limited. For this and other reasons, ectothermy is an extremely effective and successful strategy in most of Earth's environments, as shown by the abundance and diversity of ectothermic animals. Modes of heat exchange, whether it is an ectotherm or an endotherm, an organism, like any object, exchanges heat by four physical processes: conduction, convection, radiation, and evaporation. It distinguishes these processes, which account for the flow of heat within an organism and between an organism and its external environment. Note that heat is always transferred from an object of higher temperature to one of lower temperature, balancing heat loss and gain. For endotherms and for those ectotherms that thermoregulate, the essence of thermoregulation is managing the heat budget so that rates of heat gain are equal to rates of heat loss. If the heat budget is unbalanced, the animal becomes either warmer or colder. Five general categories of adaptations help animal thermoregulate. Insulation, a major thermoregulatory adaptation in mammals and bears, is insulation, hair, feathers, or fat layers, which reduces the flow of heat between an animal and its environment and lowers the energy cost of keeping warm. In mammals, the insulating material is associated with the integumentary system. The outer covering of the body, consisting of the skin, hair, and nails, claws, or hooves. In some species, skin is a key organ of the integumentary system, in addition to functioning as a thermoregulatory organ by housing nerves, sweat glands, blood vessels, and hair follicles. The skin protects internal body parts from mechanical injury, infection, and drying out. The skin consists of two layers, the epidermis and the dermis, underlined by a tissue layer called the hypodermis, as shown in this video. The epidermis is the outermost layer of skin and is composed mostly of dead epithelial cells that continually flake and fall off. New cells pushing up from lower layers replace the cells that are lost. The dermis supports the epidermis and contains hair follicles, oil and sweat glands, muscles, nerves, and blood vessels. The hypodermis contains adipose tissue, which includes fat storing cells and blood vessels. Adipose tissue provides varying degrees of insulation. Um, Depending on the species, the insulating power of a layer of fur or feathers mainly depends on how much still air the layer traps. Hair loses most of its insulating power when wet. Most land mammals and bears react to cold by raising their fur or feathers, thereby trapping a thicker layer of air. Humans rely more on a layer of fat just beneath the skin as insulation. Goosebumps are a vestige of hair raising inherited from our furry ancestors. Marine mammals such as whales and seals have a very thick layer of insulating fat called blubber just under their skin. Marine mammals swim in water colder than the body core temperature, and many species spend at least part of the year in nearly freezing polar seas. The transfer of heat to water occurs 50 to 100 times more rapidly than heat transfer to air. The skin temperature of a marine mammal is close to water temperature. Even so, the proper insulation is so effective that many mammals maintain body core temperatures of about 36 to 38 degrees Celsius, with metabolic rates about the same as those of land mammals of similar size. Circulatory adaptations. Many endotherms and some ectotherms alter the amount of blood and hence heat flowing between the body core and the skin. Elevated blood flow in the skin normally results from vasodilation and increase in the diameter of superficial blood vessels. Those near the body surface triggered by nerve signals that relax the muscles of the vessel walls. In endotherms, vasodilation usually warms the skin, increasing the transfer of body heat to a cool environment by radiation, conduction, and convection. The reverse process, vasoconstriction, reduces blood flow and heat transfer by decreasing the diameter of superficial vessels. Another circulatory adaptation is an arrangement of blood vessels called a countercurrent heat exchanger that is important for reducing heat loss in many endotherms, including marine mammals and bears, as shown in this figure. Explores two examples of countercurrent heat exchangers. In some species, blood can either go through the heat exchanger or bypass it by way of other blood vessels. In this way, the relative amount of blood that follows through the two different paths may vary, adjusting the rate of heat loss as an animal's physiological state or environment changes. Unlike most fishes, which are thermoconformers with internal body temperatures usually within 1 to 2 Celsius degrees of the surrounding water temperature, some specialized endothermic bony fishes and sharks have circulatory adaptations that retain metabolic heat in the body. These animals include large, powerful swimmers such as bluefin tuna and swordfish, as well as the great white shark. Large arteries convey most of the cold blood from the gills of tissue just under the skin. Branches deliver blood to the deep muscles when the small vessels are arranged in a countercurrent heat exchanger, as shown in this figure. Endothermy enables the vigorous, sustained activity that is characteristic of these animals by keeping the main swimming muscles several degrees warmer than the tissues near the animal's surface, which are about the same temperatures as the surrounding water. Some reptiles also have physiological adaptations that regulate heat loss. For example, in the marine iguana, which inhabits the Galapagos Islands, body heat is conserved by vasoconstriction of superficial blood vessels, routing more blood to the central core of the body when the animal is swimming in the cold ocean. Many endothermic insects, bumblebees, honeybees, and some moths have a countercurrent heat exchanger that helps maintain a high temperature in the thorax, where the flight muscles are located. For example, the heat exchanger keeps the thorax of certain winter active moths at about 30 Celsius degree, as shown this view. During flight, even on cold snowy nights when the external temperature may be sub-freezing. In contrast, insects flying in hot weather run the risk of overheating because of the large amount of heat produced by working flight muscles. In some species, the countercurrent mechanism can be shut down, allowing muscle produced heat to be lost from the thorax to the abdomen and from there to the environment. A bumblebee queen incubates her eggs this way. She generates heat by shivering her flight muscles and then transfers the heat to her abdomen, which she presses against her eggs. Cooling by evaporative heat loss. Many mammals and bears live in places where thermoregulation requires cooling as well as warming. If environmental temperature is above body temperature, animals gain heat from the environment as well as from metabolism. And evaporation is only way to keep body temperature from rising rapidly. Terrestrial animals lose water by evaporation across the skin and when they breathe, as shown in this figure. Water absorbs considerable heat when it evaporates. This heat is carried away from the body surface with the water vapor. Some animals have adaptations that can greatly augment this cooling effect. Panting is important in bears and many mammals. Some bears have a pouch richly supplied with blood vessels in the floor of the mouth. Fluttering in pouch increases evaporation. Pigeons, for example, can use evaporative cooling to keep body temperature close to 40 Celsius degree in air temperatures as high as 60 Celsius degree as long as they have sufficient water. Sweating or bathing moistens the skin and enhances evaporative cooling, as shown this figure. Many terrestrial animals have sweat glands controlled by the nervous system. Other mechanisms that promote evaporative cooling include spreading saliva on body surfaces and adaptation of small kangaroos and rodents for combating severe heat stress. Some species of amphibians, such as bullfrogs, can vary the amount of mucus they secrete from their surface, a response that regulates evaporative cooling. Behavior responses. Both endotherms and ectotherms use behavioral responses to control body temperature. Many ectotherms maintain a nearly constant body temperature through relatively simple behaviors. More extreme behavioral adaptations in some animals include hibernation or migration to a more suitable climate. All amphibians and most reptiles, other than bears, are ectotherms. Therefore, these organisms control body temperature mainly by behavior. The optimal temperature range for amphibians varies substantially with the species. For example, certain closely related species of salamanders have average body temperatures ranging from 7 Celsius degree to 25 Celsius degree when exposed to air. Most amphibians lose heat rapidly by evaporation from their moist body surfaces, making it difficult to keep sufficiently warm. However, by moving to a location where solar heat is available, an amphibian can maintain a satisfactory body temperature, and when the surroundings are too warm, amphibian see cooler microenvironments such as shaded areas. Like amphibians, reptiles, other than bears, thermoregulate mainly by behavior. When cold, they seek warm places or orienting themselves toward heat sources and expanding the body surface. Exposed to a heat source when hot, they move to cool areas or turn in another direction. Many reptiles keep their body to temperatures very stable over the course of a day by shuttling back and forth between warm and cold spots. Many terrestrial invertebrates can adjust internal temperature by the same behavioral mechanisms used by vertebrate ectotherms. The desert locust, for example, must reach a certain temperature to become active, and on cold days it orients in a direction that maximizes the absorption of sunlight. Other terrestrial invertebrates have certain postures that enable them to maximize or minimize their absorption of heat from the sun, as shown in this figure. Honeybees use a thermoregulatory mechanism that depends on social behavior. In cold weather, they increase heat production and huddle together, thereby retaining heat. They maintain a relatively constant temperature by changing the density of the huddling. Individuals move between the cooler outer edges of the cluster and the warmer center, thus circulating and distributing the heat. Even when huddling, honeybees must expend considerable energy to keep warm during long periods of cold weather, and this is the main function of storing large quantities of fuel in the hive in the form of honey. Honeybees also control the temperature of their hive by transporting water to it in hot weather and fanning with their wings, which promotes evaporation and convection. Thus, a honeybee colony uses many of the mechanisms thermoregulation seen in single organisms.